So I know this isn't exactly what you were expecting. I know I said early in the week that I was going to watch 4 months, 3 weeks, and 2 days. However, some of my friends have been harassing / blackmailing me into watching Murder Party for today's episode. So here I am. Welcome back, everybody. This is Ryan from Ryan's Views. Welcome to another day of 100 films in 100 days. Episode 15. Or is it 16? I don't know. But either way, today I watched Murder Party, which is available on Netflix. It was released in 2007 and directed by Jeremy Saulnier. I don't know how to pronounce that properly. It was an independent film which was brought around to a couple different festivals, such as Slam Dance and the Maryland Film Festival. The budget was estimated to be between $190,000 and $230,000, which is a really small budget considering this has some kind of good practical effects at some points, specifically makeup in some of the last scenes. This film's about a man named Christopher who is not very interesting, pretty run-of-the-mill, everyman type of guy, who stumbles upon an invitation to a quote-unquote murder party, which he accepts, and he dresses up in a robot costume made entirely out of cardboard, and he goes to said party, and it turns out that that title was a bit more literal than he was expecting. So he gets captured by the people hosting the party, and they plan on killing him for artistic purposes, so they can try to get some grant money to be able to further their artistic endeavors. You find out throughout this film that these guys who are doing this for the artistic purposes, they're dorks. They're overall just really big freaking losers. They're not as smart as they think they are, which I think is a really funny, interesting concept. And I think the whole thing is a bit of a commentary on like the independent art scene and how people are trying to push the boundaries for really just superficial reasons, just so they can get like more money to produce their work. I wouldn't be surprised if there's some art house film where people were actually killed like for the sake of art. So there's this ringleader to the group of the guys who plan on killing Christopher, and his name is Alexander. Or at least we think his name is Alexander at the beginning. We find out more about him later on, but I'm not going to reveal everything. And he has this guy, I can't remember the character's name, but he's like his drug dealer. He's from Belarus. I don't have that flag, sorry. But basically, these guys just do a bunch of drugs. They plan on killing Christopher, but they never actually really get around to it because they're just so high and they just let all the other stuff get over them. They get too distracted way too easily, and they're too caught up in their own like little artistic fantasy or whatever. I was going into this film expecting like a true horror film, but when I found out that it was a horror comedy, I was pleasantly surprised. Not as much when I found out, but when I actually watched the film. I thought it was a very smart, dark comedy with some horror elements thrown in. It's quite grotesque. There's a lot of gore in the film, there's a lot of blood, but it's funny because there's characters who will get shot or stabbed or something, and they'll keep acting like nothing happened, which is a recurring theme throughout the film. All these guys are dressed up in goofy looking costumes. So the main guy, Alexander, is dressed up as an old-fashioned vampire, and then the guy Paul, who's also there, is also dressed like an old-fashioned vampire, which is funny, and they get into a bit of an argument about that. And then there's a girl who's dressed as a cheerleader, and there's also a girl named Lizzie, who's dressed as Pris from Blade Runner, played by Daryl Hannah. Then there's this other guy, who I can't remember his name, but he is dressed as a werewolf. And then there's a guy, Bill, who is dressed as one of the Furies, or the baseball Furies, from the film The Warriors, which is another film that I love. That's pretty close to being in my top 10 favorite films, but not quite. So at one point they end up taking truth serum, and they all start acting really silly and saying stupid stuff. And I'm not going to reveal everything, you know, I don't want to spoil it. You should definitely watch it, check it out, it's on Netflix. But it's funny. There's some really funny scenes in this, and it's really clever what it does. So I'd like to go into a bit of a digression real quick and talk about my opinion on horror films as a genre and why I am not very much into them. So for all my life, I've been very easily surprised, and people say, oh, you get scared so easily, but it's not really that. I hate jump scares. I hate a lot of that stuff. And I don't mind blood and some grotesque stuff. Some of the really grotesque stuff I don't like, but like I love a lot of kung fu movies and action films that have a lot of blood and stuff where it's like over the top and silly, you know? Like I love Kill Bill, that's one of my favorites, and I love all sorts of like crazy kung fu movies where people's heads get ripped off, their arms get ripped off, people are sliced open. It's funny, but it's like goofy and it's over the top. But I've never liked jump scares. That's always been something that I've never liked. And that's why I've avoided horror films a lot of the time. I know this is a horror comedy, but I just thought it'd be a good time to discuss my opinion on horror films. And I've tried watching a lot of the really old horror films that are really just dated and kind of not scary at all. And I like those, like some of, you know, your Frankensteins, like the original Frankenstein, Dracula, Wolfman, Creature from the Black Lagoon, all sorts of stuff like that. Because that's just a lot more of a creepy atmosphere than like actual jump scares like they do now. Because for a while, my favorite horror film was Silence of the Lambs, which I found out isn't really much of a horror. It's more of a thriller. So then basically my new favorite horror film became Evil Dead. And I love Evil Dead. I think that film was awesome. And now my new favorite horror film is Pixels by Adam Sandler. Aren't I so clever? But no, in all actuality, I think that probably that first Nightmare on Elm Street is probably my new favorite horror film. I'm gonna get around to watching more and more. I haven't seen any of the Halloween films. I haven't seen any of the Friday the 13th films. So I'm gonna watch more. And I really liked the ones I've seen so far for this show. So, now back to Murder Party. The acting in this film was quite good, especially considering it was on such a low budget and these are all independent, like small-time actors. I think they did a really good job. I also want to do another digression now and talk about my opinion on art films, and also a bit on the whole independent film scene in general. Now, I'm not a fan of mumblecore films. I haven't seen really any of them. I've seen a couple. Actually, I haven't really seen any that are like legitimately considered mumblecore films. But like, it just doesn't appeal to me. Like, films where the entire premise is just people sitting around having conversations just really isn't interesting to me at all. Now, I know that there's some films that are like that I enjoy, like Doctor Strangelove. That's a lot of people just having conversations, you know? Hell, even Star Trek is a lot of just people talking about what's going on, talking about their opinions on things, you know? There's a lot of people who have problems with art films, and I think the most common issue that people have is that they think that art films are very condescending, and they're trying to make you feel dumb for not understanding it, or like, why don't you get this? Like, that's one thing I notice a lot too with it, is there is a bit of this condescending nature sometimes, but I think that there's a lot of good that comes out of art film, and I think that there can be a lot of really interesting and smart avenues to be explored with it. That's just my opinion though, and what the hell do I know? I'm just some business student in South Carolina. So I don't really have much more to say about this film, and I know I say this a lot, but it's really hard to talk about something you liked rather than something you didn't like. I've been picking movies that I've enjoyed every single time, so when I go back home tomorrow and I show off my shelves and stuff, I might pick some movies that look genuinely really bad, and we might be able to get a laugh out of them, you know? I'm really glad that this film is on Netflix, because I think it's good to try to promote independent films and independent cinema, try to keep a lot of that alive and well. And I think that's a really good thing. It's really good for the film industry as a whole. And I think companies like A24, who are bringing independent film a bit more to the forefront, are really doing a good job. A24 very rarely released a bad film. I still need to see Climax. I still need to get around to seeing Climax. That looks like a really, really good film. I haven't gotten around to seeing it though, but I'm excited for it. So let's move on to final thoughts, and I'll give my final score for the film. So overall, I think this is a really good film. I think it's quite funny, it's quite smart, a bit subversive. Definitely watch it. It's on Netflix, you know? It's only an hour and 20 minutes, so it's barely even a feature film. So you should definitely watch it. It's definitely worth your time. I'm gonna give it a 4 out of 5. That's my third 4 out of 5 in a row. So thank you very much for watching. That was Murder Party, available on Netflix. Make sure to watch it. I bet you're wondering now, Ryan, what are you gonna watch tomorrow? Are you gonna finally get around to watching 4 months, 3 weeks, and 2 days? The answer to that is no. I'm gonna watch something back in my hometown when I get home. And I don't know if I'll be able to release the video tomorrow, because I might have to edit it on Saturday, or I might have to actually film on Saturday when I have daylight. But I think I have an idea of what I'm gonna watch tomorrow. I've been eyeing up The Road Warrior, Mad Max 2. However, I've already seen the first Mad Max, and I feel like it wouldn't be right to watch the second one for this show, because if I don't talk about the first one, then what's the point, you know? But I think because The Road Warrior got a wide release in America while the first Mad Max didn't, so a lot of people watched Road Warrior first and then watched Mad Max. I think it'll work out fine to be able to watch Road Warrior and talk about it, even though I've already seen Mad Max and won't have talked about it on the show. And I will briefly give a description of how it goes, but I don't know if that's what I'm going to watch tomorrow. I might watch something else. I might just wait until Saturday. We'll see. Thank you very much for watching. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Check out the description. I've got all sorts of channels down there. I've got my friend Isaac Taylor's YouTube, his Letterboxd, my friend John's Letterboxd, and also Avant-Garde Criminal, who does all my thumbnails for me. His Facebook page is down there, so definitely make sure to check him out and give him some love. All right, I'll see you guys tomorrow.